I'm Roger Simmons with OrlandoSentinel.com. We're continuing our coverage of the shooting at the Pulse nightclub. Today we've assembled again a group of Orlando Sentinel reporters to help answer some of the questions you may have about the shooting that happened on early Sunday morning and took 50 lives, 49 victims, and the gunman. Joining me to talk about what we know about the situation so far is Mary Shanklin, who is covering an aspect of the story, as well as David Harris and Paul Brinkman. And let me start off, gang, by just asking you, what sort of stories are you working on today dealing with the shooting coverage? Mary?
Today I'm working on one I got from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the gun sale numbers for this week. And in the days following the shooting, the gun sales have really about doubled. Not so much on Sunday, the day of, but as the week trickled on. Huge surge in sales according to background checks.
And that's interesting because we've seen that with other mass shootings before too, and I think our initial reports were it didn't seem to be a spike, but then now we've been seeing that go up.
Right, and you know what the gun shop owners will tell you is it's not always so much people being interested in protecting themselves as they'll say that it's concerns from people that they're no longer going to be able to buy these guns, that that there'll be legislative action to really tamp down on that.
Right, interesting. Paul, what have you been working on in regard to the story?
So I've really been digging into fundraising over the last 2 days. There was one of the funds hit $5 million yesterday, the Equality Florida Fund, and then the One Orlando Fund was at $6.8 million yesterday. But I'm also interviewing family members of other mass shooting victims who are on their way here to offer comfort and advice to the victims here. Right. and their families.
Right. And David, you're what we're doing here is part of a story you're working on.
Yep. You're going to see the Q&A in either tomorrow or Sunday's paper. I'm also trying to continue to talk with first responders, firefighters, paramedics, police officers who were there that night, and how they're doing and how they're coping with seeing everything that they saw.
Right. Well, great. All right, let's get to some of the questions we've had. These were submitted on Twitter, Facebook, and actually some calls into our newsroom as well. So the first one is a Twitter question from the Track Addict, and the question was, what excuse could there possibly be for it to take 3 hours for a police response? And I think we've answered this before, but David, what's the answer do you have to this?
Yeah, this has been a popular question, people wanting to know. So basically you had the two initial onslaughts. You had the off-duty police officer who was working security at the club in the parking lot, hearing the shots. He runs in, shoots with the gunman. The gunman, he realizes that the gunman he's outgunned, so he calls for backup. Then two other officers arrive a couple of minutes later. They engage in the gunman. This is when the gunman goes into the bathroom. There's about 5 or 6 people in one bathroom, and about 15 or 20 others in another bathroom. And so at this point, the police have gotten contact with the shooter, and he said that he has explosives. So at this point, they want to be careful to make sure if he does have explosives that he doesn't set him off. Right. So they were talking with him, trying to get him out, trying to get a peaceful solution during this 3 hours. And then toward the end, he said that he had bomb vests that he was going to put on victims, and in 15 minutes he was going to blow them all up. So at that point, Chief John Mina decided to breach the building, and that's when they went in.
Right. So there wasn't a 3-hour lag in when we first heard about this to when the police. They were there pretty quickly.
No, they were there.
As well.
As soon as the first shots were fired, the off-duty officer was there, and then a couple minutes after that, the backup arrived.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right, so let's go to some Facebook questions. We have one from, I believe it's EJ Easterbrook. Where is the video surveillance? Haven't heard anyone talk about it. Can't they use that to prove how many gunmen were involved? And David, I don't know, I know the FBI has really locked down most of this investigation. They're kind of taking the lead. I don't know if there is any video surveillance at this point, but this question of multiple gunmen keep coming up, and I think the Orlando police and others have answered that question pretty emphatically. No, there was not a second or third or fourth gunman.
Yeah, they've been saying from the onset that there's only one gunman. As far as video surveillance, We don't know that yet, as if there was inside the club or from surrounding businesses. Another thing I asked today is if OPD or any of the SWAT team members had body cam videos. Again, don't know.
Right, and I know Orlando Sentinel has been among the news organizations that has, we're actually going to court to try and receive the 911 calls from that night to help put together what happened there at the scene. But again, the federal government's kind of taking the lead on this and doesn't want to give up information while the investigation is ongoing. Let's go to another question we have from Melinda Martinez on Facebook. Melinda asked, how about demanding an explanation from the FBI that investigated this radical Islamic jihadist on 3 different occasions? David, what about this whole notion that he was investigated? We've heard a lot of information about that.
Yeah, he was interviewed by the FBI 3 different times in 2013 and 2014. Basically, one of them, he had ties to a suicide bomber overseas that was from Florida originally. And another instance at work where he said he had ties to a terrorist organization. FBI investigated it for 10 months and came to the conclusion that there was no real ties to any organizations and that he was at that time not a threat.
Okay. All right, let's go to another question from Roy Faro. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Sorry about that. Why have we not heard anything about the security guard and off-duty officer that should have been at the entrance to the club? They briefly say they exchanged gunfire, but that's it. We've reported about that previously, a little bit about what they did, and you kind of went into a little bit just there.
Yeah,
Any more
yeah,
clarity?
I touched on it briefly. Again, those 3 different exchanges with police. The initial one with the off-duty officer, the second one with the off-duty officer and the 2 responding officers, and then the final one where he was killed with the SWAT team. So
Okay. So that's it. So basically there was kind of an exchange there.
and it's not. We don't really know if he got into the club with the gun or how that happened.
Right, we're trying to piece that together. In fact, in Sunday's Orlando Sentinel on orlandosentinel.com and also in our print edition, we're in the process of putting together the most comprehensive timeline we have put together of trying to go minute by minute on what happened during the shooting inside the club, using information we received from law enforcement, from survivors, from a lot of other sources. So I think hopefully we'll have more clarity on that for you as soon as possible on the website and in print as well. Let's go to another question from Rosie Rose. I keep hearing 49 people lost their lives at the nightclub, but I also heard that there were lives lost in the hospital after arriving. Is that 49 total? I just don't want anyone to be forgotten. This event has broken my heart as well as made me see how much love and compassion my city has. And as scared as I am raising my children, I'm happy they're seeing the unity. And that is a really nice thing as well through the coming together as Orlando United with all of us. And you guys correct me because we've gone over these numbers before, but so the death toll remains at 50, has not gone up. It was 49 victims and the gunman. I believe 53 originally were taken to the hospital as injured. The latest information that I think we have is 23 people are still at ORMC, 6 of them critical, and the death toll, the total number of 50, including the gunman, 9 of those were people who died at the hospital.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is kind of an example of when there's a traumatic event like this, the way information rolls out is not always entirely logical. It has to do with the way that police are able to confirm things and able to release things so that they don't jeopardize their investigation. So I think we had the 50 death toll number first, and then somebody announced that 9 had died at the hospital. And people thought that was in addition to the 50, but it was actually part of the 50.
Right. Good. Thanks for the clarification on that, because we actually don't want to forget any of the victims of this, obviously. I have another question from Justine Thompson Cowan. I would like to hear more about the funds that are coming in, how they will be spent, and what assurances there are that they will go directly to the victims. Also, will Pulse get some of the money to rebuild? I know, Paul, you've been following that. You mentioned the $6.8 million figure. How are those funds going to go out, basically?
Right, so the total of all the GoFundMe pages, there's apparently 300 something GoFundMe pages now related to the Pulse shooting, and their total is somewhere around 3.4 million now, 5.4 million now. And then the One Orlando fund is an additional 6.8 million. So we're probably around 12 million now, and it may very well be significantly higher than that by now. Those were yesterday's numbers that I have. So as far as there is some development right now where people are trying to make sure that they are structuring these things correctly. Equality Florida is saying that they will use a national victims organization to distribute the funds, and that the 100% of the money will go directly to victims. As they raise more and more and more money, I don't know how that will all work out. But then the One Orlando Fund originally said that they would provide funding to organizations. After that, some people began to say that that's not the best way to do this, and that money that siphons through organizations often doesn't get down to the places where it needs to be. And mass shooting victims have contacted us. I mean, families of mass shooting victims have contacted us and said that in other shootings, there were families who didn't get any money for weeks or months, even though millions had been raised. So they are looking at all of this right now, and there are people who are sending out cautions and warnings about how these funds should be structured. It's pretty complicated right now. The city did come out and say that their model is still developing, and now today they've said that they will also provide their funds directly to victims. But another fund was announced today too. Central Florida Foundation has said that they will be a place where you can donate to a broader impact. There are multiple impacts here where people may need money. Businesses that were closed for a significant, we don't know how long they'll be closed. They're still closed, and other fallout in the community. So the group that I talked to, support group for families of mass shooting victims, said that that they do want the money to go directly to victims as much as possible. They do recognize that there's some impact on police, but they are, they're watching. They're flying in here Sunday, so we'll hear more from them.
Right, and I think that's something that we'll be doing as well, keeping track. There's so much money, we want to make sure it goes directly to the victims.
Right.
So we'll be following that as well.
One of the things,
Just one question on that. When you've seen this done in other places, how do they determine how much to give to the victims? Do the victims, come up with a list of expenses? Is it, kind of prorated?
Well, that has been a source of contention, and one of the reasons why it is more complicated than it seems perhaps at first, because the people that I talked to today said that the way they think it should be done is that money should be awarded to the families, and that the families should decide how they need to spend it, because every family is so different. I mean, the problem is that there's been a lot of fraud and waste just because of bureaucratic structures, administrative expenses, things like that. So,
and someone who's shot in the leg is not this light situation. Someone who's shot in the chest or some more serious
Having
extremity,
an injury that's going to last
much
much
longer.
longer.
A lot longer. So how do you balance that money and who
That's
gets
interesting.
what?
Okay, we'll find that out. So another question from Alina Josefina. I apologize again on the name. How did the families access the donation money? Paul, have they figured that out yet at this point? I know that they're trying to get a mechanism going, but
Right. So these things are still evolving right now, as I said. One way that GoFundMe.org, the GoFundMe page, the GoFundMe website, they are actually recommending that if you know a victim personally and you know that they are struggling and need assistance, that you should go on to GoFundMe and set up a fund in that person's name. And then they will actually come in and verify that you have a connection to that person and that you are going to give the money to that person. And they won't release the funds until then. But there are a lot of people who are saying that GoFundMe is a good mechanism to set up if someone needs money now and there are people wanting to donate to that person.
And I know Camping World Stadium has been set up for
Yes.
people to go to and everything, and so they're being processed that way as well, the families of survivors and victims.
Right, and the FBI is in charge of that operation, and the FBI does have I don't remember the exact name of it at this point, but it's a National Victims Fund, and they actually oversee that. So the way the city and the FBI are working together at Camping World Stadium also seems to be doing it the right way.
Right. Okay, and we'll keep tabs on that as well because we don't want to see this money go to waste. You kind of mentioned a little bit, we had one more question kind of about money from Steve Bigness, who had a question. What about the businesses that are hurting because they've been blocked now for 6 days?
Right, we had a story that my colleague Kyle Arnold did on this subject, and those businesses are definitely really being impacted by this now. They are coming to toward the end of the month now, where they will have to pay certain bills and things like that, and they've been closed for a week now, and we're not sure how long they will be closed. Some of them were allowed to go back into their businesses and reopen in a limited fashion, but there were still blockades and things like that down there, and there is a part of it that is still closed. This was the issue of businesses that were impacted that really came up in Boston, and some of those businesses there were denied insurance compensation. They had policies, but they were denied. There was also a classification as a terror incident that insurance companies didn't qualify for because it didn't reach a certain threshold of damage or impact. So we will also be following that issue to see,
to find out, because some of these, I mean, they're just, it's not like there's some huge, I mean, I know there's a Super Target down there, but most of these are mom and pop kind of businesses.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Right, doing that. Okay. All right, now let's get to some of the calls that we've had in the newsroom. And Mary, I think you can answer some of these because there are a lot of gun-related questions as well. The first one that came into us is, how could this guy get a semi-automatic rifle?
Yeah, I think that's like the one that David was being asked about, what happened in the 3 hours. That's a very popular question, and I think it's being asked, from our readers on up to, the highest levels of our country. So in Florida, he does have to pass a background check, and that's irregardless of whether he would have bought it at a gun shop, which he did purchase it down in St. Lucie at a gun shop. He had a concealed weapons permit. When you have that, you still have to go through the background check. Even if he bought it online, he still would have had to gone through the background check. As David mentioned, this is someone who had been questioned by the FBI on 3 different occasions for months at a time, and it was determined that he didn't have an integral role in terrorist activity. I think he was in one case, he had kind of restated some Islamic propaganda to a coworker. These were things that are not the type of things that are going to show up on your background check. There's about 12 different reasons in Florida that you can't get, that would kill your ability. Right. You can't have a felony arrest. You can't you can't be on illegal drugs. You can't be, judged to be mentally incapacitated. There's one that I thought was kind of interesting, that you can't have been convicted of a misdemeanor on domestic violence charges. And we do know his previous wife had stated that that there was some abuse there, but apparently there was no conviction of that.
Right.
So he even though he was questioned by the FBI on those 12 reasons to boot you out of the gun purchase process, he was able to pass all of those.
Right. Another question people are asking, I think we've reported this a couple of times, but even in the flood of information that's come out about this, I've forgotten. What brand of guns did he use?
Yes, it was an AR-15. It's an automatic rifle. It's about this big. They start in price probably like about in the 500s. They can go up to about 1,300. there's probably about 20 manufacturers of these in the country. I don't think anybody has determined yet, the brand of this, but he had that, and in addition to that, he had a 9mm pistol. And we know from hearing first-person stories from the people who were trapped in there that he was using both of those.
Right, doing that. This is a question that I think a lot of people are asking. What are lawmakers doing about this right now? That's the big question.
Some people would say they're doing a lot, and some people would say that they're not doing a lot. They actually, this week, there was a Democratic-led filibuster, and what the Democrats in particular are trying to do is trying to ban the sale of gun to anyone who's on a terrorist watch list. And so just this week, and this happened also last December after the Sandy Hook mass shootings. There was a big charge, to try to ban those sales. That failed. I think that one failed by about 60 votes. So this week, on the heels of this Orlando shooting, there's another filibuster. It lasted 14 hours. And at the end of it, there were assurances from both sides of the aisles that they would pursue this idea of banning those sales. And even the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, that's long opposed, really any kind of clampdown on sales, has said that if you're on the terrorist watch list, that at the very least, the processing of your application should be slowed down while the FBI thoroughly investigates, your background.
They can see why you're on that list and whether or not it would not be a good idea.
And it's important to note out that he was on the terror watch list, but he was not at the time of the shooting. He was taken off after he was investigated.
Yeah, that's important.
So it may not have stopped him in this case from getting a gun then.
Yeah.
Actually, though, I mean, even if you are on the terror watch list, you can still buy guns.
Right. But that's what the legislation is trying to do.
Right.
But, yeah.
All right, Paul, I think you've touched on this subject as well with reporting, and I think you were among the first to report this, a possible motive for this. Why did he pick this gay club?
So, yeah, I mean, we don't know the answer. We've, many people have,
informed speculation, let's put it that way.
On Monday is when we started hearing stories that people said they had seen him in that gay bar before, and that and we didn't report those right away, but after we had 4 people saying that, we did report it. It has not been confirmed officially, although officials have confirmed that he traveled to Pulse at least one other time with his wife. And they are still investigating that part of it and whether his wife knew that he was planning a shooting. So if he had been to the club, it may just be that it's not. We don't know whether he actually, had gay tendencies or not. There's been a lot of stories written along those lines that he used dating apps and things like that. So he's either. So whether he was scouting the place or going there to meet men, we still don't have a definitive answer to that. There have been people asking questions whether we went to any other gay clubs that night, and again, I don't think there's any evidence of that either. So we really don't know why he chose that gay club. If he had been there before, then the question becomes: was he there to scout it, or was he there, just to have fun and hang out? And so that all goes back into his motive, and we just don't know yet.
And then adding to it, it was Latin night at the club,
right.
And you have to add that to the question too. If that kind of led to his
Yeah, I don't know about any sort of the connection to the Latin part, other than it may have been a coincidence, or did he specifically was targeting Latins as well? I don't know.
Well, we do have some evidence that he often, according to people that he worked with and things like that, that he did often, express anger toward classes of people, in a stereotyping, discriminatory way.
That's sad. All right, we've got a couple questions come in while we've been on with the live stream. Let's get to the first one from Season, and again, excuse me if I don't get the name right, Balako. Why is the shooter's wife not under arrest?
Yeah, she's under investigation. You know what the FBI is trying to pinpoint is exactly what did she know and when did she know it. And there's been kind of conflicting reports that she knew about it, or she knew that he was thinking about it, or we just don't know at this point, what she knew and when she knew it.
Right.
So, and it's gonna. We don't have a timeline as to when a decision on charges may come.
Right, but we'll keep on tabs on that and see when that happens. Another one, Gary Faircloth, and this is a question that has come into the newsroom, and I don't quite think we have an answer to this, so I'm going to throw it out to the whole group. Does law enforcement have any idea how many victims or wounded could have been shot by law enforcement? I think that's the big question we're trying to find out, is exactly how many were killed by the gunman, how many may have been injured during the rescue attempt. But as far as I know, we don't have any information on that. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all in the investigation. The autopsies have all been done, and they got to match the guns with the bullets and all that. So
Right.
that's going to take.
I think we will eventually find out, but at this point we don't.
We do have an account from a victim who has gone on video on New York Times and one other publication saying that that they did shoot in his direction and that he had to wave and yell that he was a victim. So perhaps that's where some of that talk and some of those
could be
questions
coming
come from.
Right. And again, it's just one of those things, like we have to wait till we get the ballistics reports and everything to look at that. Andrew Bott, excuse me again on the name. What is the latest on the Westboro Baptist Church protests? Anyone want to take that one? We know they've applied for a permit to protest in Orlando.
Yeah, I know. Reporter Alyssa Choney wrote a story in today's paper about that. I believe they said that they're going to be at 2 funerals for 2 of the victims. I don't know the names, and I don't know the specifics, other than I know that there was talk of counter protests.
Right.
People who were trying to shield them from the family and whatnot.
Right, doing that. All right, well, that's it for the questions so far. If you have further questions, we invite you to send them into OrlandoSentinel.com and our Facebook page. The other thing we'll let you know is that, as David mentioned, in tomorrow's print edition of Orlando Sentinel and later today on OrlandoSentinel.com, we're going to compile these questions and others as well and try and have answers to them as we continue to follow the tragic shooting at the Pulse nightclub. But for my colleagues here, for now, this is Roger.